Princess Butterscotch's triumphant yap turned into a terrified yelp as the ground beneath her tiny paws suddenly gave way. The freshly disturbed earth around the pool's edge crumbled like a stale cookie, sending 5 pounds of fluff and fury tumbling into the 8-foot-deep pit. Karen's scream could have shattered windows 3 streets over. "Stop the machine!" She bellowed at the excavator operator, who couldn't hear her over the engine noise and his noise-canceling headphones. Karen frantically waved her arms like she was directing aircraft, her pink bathrobe flapping behind her like a deranged superhero cape. When that failed, she did something that surprised even herself. She picked up a chunk of concrete and hurled it at the excavator's cab. The operator finally noticed the crazy woman in pink fuzzy slippers and shut down the engine. "Lady, what the hell? My dog is in the pit," Karen shrieked, pointing wildly at the hole where Princess Butterscotch was now whimpering pitifully from the bottom. The operator, a weathered man named Tony, who'd seen his share of construction site drama, peered over the edge and shook his head. "Well, I'll be damned." Tony muttered, "How'd a little rat dog get down there?" "She's not a rat. She's a purebred Pomeranian worth more than your truck." Karen snapped, then immediately felt guilty. This wasn't the time for her usual superiority complex. Her baby was hurt and scared, and that trumped everything else. "Please, just help me get her out." Mike Henderson finally emerged from his house, coffee mug in hand, looking confused about why his pool demolition had turned into a rescue operation. "Karen, what's going on? Why are you in my yard? Your incompetent demolition crew almost killed my dog." Karen's voice cracked with genuine emotion, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She fell into your pit because you didn't secure the area properly." Mike's expression softened when he saw Princess Butterscotch at the bottom of the hole, clearly shaken but apparently uninjured. "Okay, let's just focus on getting her out safely." "Tony, can you?" "I'm not going down there," Tony interrupted. "Insurance won't cover me rescuing pets. But I can lower a ladder." Karen stared at the makeshift aluminum ladder extending into the pit and realized what everyone was thinking. She was the smallest person present, and Princess Butterscotch would only come to her anyway. The dog was traumatized and wouldn't trust strangers. "I'll go," she announced, surprising herself with her resolve. She'd always been afraid of heights, or in this case depths, but maternal instinct was stronger than fear. "Karen, you don't have to." Mike started, but she was already kicking off her slippers and tying her bathrobe tighter. "Hold the ladder steady," she commanded, her usual authoritative tone returning despite her tear-streaked face. As she began her descent, she couldn't help but notice how different the neighborhood looked from 8 feet down. Smaller somehow, less important. Princess Butterscotch limped toward her, whimpering but tail-wagging weakly. Karen scooped up her precious companion, checking for injuries with trembling hands. A small cut on one paw, some scrapes, but nothing serious. The relief was overwhelming. "She's okay," Karen called up, then realized she had a new problem. Climbing out while carrying a dog was going to be significantly harder than climbing down empty-handed. "Karen," Mike called down, "I'm really sorry about this. We should have put up better barriers." Looking up at her neighbor's genuinely concerned face, Karen felt something shift inside her chest. When was the last time someone had apologized to her so sincerely? When was the last time she'd accepted responsibility for her own pet's safety instead of immediately blaming others? The climb out of the pit took 20 minutes, 3 near falls, and more cooperation between Karen and Mike Henderson than they'd shared in 5 years as neighbors. By the time she emerged, grass-stained and shaking, clutching Princess Butterscotch like a furry life preserver, something fundamental had changed in the dynamic between them. "Let me drive you both to the vet," Mike offered, genuine concern replacing his usual wariness around Karen. "I'll pay for any treatment she needs." Karen opened her mouth to deliver her standard lecture about liability and proper procedures, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself nodding gratefully. That's very kind of you, Mike. Thank you." The drive to the emergency vet clinic was awkwardly quiet, except for Princess Butterscotch's occasional whimper. Karen sat in the passenger seat of Mike's truck, a vehicle she complained about in 3 separate HOA meetings for being too commercial for their residential street, and actually felt grateful for its presence. "You know," Mike said carefully, "I probably should have mentioned the pool demolition to the neighbors. It's just that we've been planning to put in a vegetable garden, and Sarah's been wanting to start composting." He trailed off, clearly expecting Karen's usual explosion about proper notification procedures. But Karen was studying her dog's small face, remembering the terror she'd felt seeing Princess Butterscotch disappear into that pit. "A vegetable garden sounds lovely," she heard herself say. Sarah always did have a green thumb. Mike nearly swerved off the road. "I'm sorry, what? Did you just agree with something I said?" The veterinarian, Dr. Chen, pronounced Princess Butterscotch remarkably unharmed given her adventure. "Just some superficial scrapes and a slightly strained paw. She'll be fine in a few days, but keep her calm and limit her activity." As Mike insisted on paying the $200 vet bill despite Karen's half-hearted protests, she found herself really looking at her neighbor for the first time in years. When had his hair gone gray at the temples? When had those worry lines appeared around his eyes? She'd been so focused on his violations of her personal standards that she'd forgotten he was actually a human being with his own concerns and struggles. Walking back to Mike's truck, Princess Butterscotch sleeping peacefully in her arms, Karen felt an unfamiliar sensation, genuine remorse. "Mike, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I've been difficult as a neighbor." Mike stopped walking and stared at her like she'd announced plans to join the circus. "Karen, are you feeling all right? Did you get your head going down that ladder?" Despite everything, Karen laughed, actually laughed, not her usual sarcastic snort. "Maybe I needed to fall into a pit to gain some perspective." She paused, then added more seriously, "I know I've been the neighborhood pain in the ass. I care about our community, you know? Sometimes I care too much and forget that other people care too, just differently." The drive home was less awkward, filled with cautious conversation about gardening, the upcoming HOA meeting, and even Mike's teenager son's college applications. Karen found herself offering advice about local scholarship opportunities instead of complaints about the boys' music volume. But as they pulled into their respective driveways, Karen noticed something that made her stomach drop. Her own house had a notice taped to the front door, bright yellow paper that could only mean one thing. She climbed out of the truck, thanked Mike again, and walked toward her porch with growing dread. The notice was from the City Code Enforcement Office. Someone had reported her for multiple violations: overgrown landscaping in the rear yard, an unpermitted storage shed, and failure to maintain proper drainage that had caused water damage to neighboring properties. The complaint was anonymous, but the detailed list and personal knowledge evident in the report could only have come from someone who knew her property intimately. Karen sank onto her porch steps. Princess Butterscotch nestled against her chest and stared at the notice with dawning realization. After years of filing complaints against her neighbors, someone had turned the tables on her. The question was, who knew her property well enough to document violations she didn't even know existed? And more troubling still, had her years of neighborhood vigilance finally created an enemy who was playing by her own ruthless rulebook? Karen Whitmore's morning coffee flew across her pristine kitchen counter like a caffeinated missile when she spotted the excavator in her neighbor's backyard. Steam rose from the spreading brown puddle, not from the coffee's heat, but from Karen's ears as her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. "Wait in the holy hell is that monstrosity doing in a mine nay HBO or hood?" She shrieked at the empty kitchen, her voice cracking like a pubescent teenager. The second shock came when she realized the excavator wasn't just parked there for show. It was actively demolishing the Hendersons' above-ground pool, the same pool she'd been complaining about in HOA meetings for 3 years. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd finally gotten what she wanted, but nobody had consulted her about the method. Her perfectly manicured fingers clawed at the window blinds as she watched chunks of blue plastic flying through the air like confetti at the world's worst party. The third and most horrifying revelation struck when she noticed her beloved Pomeranian, Princess Butterscotch, had somehow escaped through the broken gate latch she'd been meaning to fix for weeks. The tiny furball was making a beeline straight for the neighbor's yard, drawn by the exciting chaos like a moth to a very dangerous flame. "No, no, no," Karen screamed, abandoning her coffee catastrophe and bolting toward the back door. Her fuzzy pink slippers provided zero traction on the hardwood floors, sending her sliding into the doorframe with a thud that rattled her collection of motivational wine signs. Princess Butterscotch was already through the fence gap, yapping excitedly at the massive machinery. Karen's day had started like any other, checking her security cameras for violations, updating her spreadsheet of neighborhood infractions, and preparing her daily report for the HOA board. As the self-appointed guardian of property values and community standards, she took her unofficial role seriously. Perhaps too seriously, according to her ex-husband. But what did he know? He'd chosen his golf clubs over their marriage. The Hendersons had been her primary target for months. Their pool was an eyesore, their grass was half an inch too long by her measurements, and don't even get her started on their teenage son's music. But this demolition was happening without proper permits. She was certain. No one had filed the correct paperwork with the Architectural Review Committee. She would have known. Racing across her lawn in her bathrobe, Karen's mind was already formulating her attack plan. First, she'd rescue Princess Butterscotch. Then, she'd demand to see permits, call the city inspector, and file an emergency complaint with the HOA board. The Hendersons would rue the day they decided to operate without consulting her first. But as she reached the fence line, watching her precious dog dancing dangerously close to the growing pit where the pool once stood, Karen realized this situation was spiraling far beyond her usual level of control. The excavator operator hadn't even noticed the tiny dog, and Mike Henderson was nowhere to be seen. For the first time in years, Karen Whitmore was genuinely afraid, not for her authority, but for something that actually mattered.